Tonight, Japan is quite literally shaken to its core. At 2:45 p.m. local time, the biggest earthquake in the country's history struck 80 miles off the nation's northeast coast. It triggered a huge tsunami which swept several miles inland, sweeping away everything in its path. It's too early to establish a death toll, but it is certain to be in the thousands. The epicenter was off the city of Sendai, but the impact was felt for hundreds of miles. Our comprehensive coverage begins with the BBC's Alan Little.
How suddenly it strikes. Mortal danger descends almost in the blink of an eye and without warning. It is terrifying. In an instant there is chaos. Then from the vastness of the sea there is a threat more menacing still. A wall of water more than 20 feet high advances across the ocean at speeds of up to 500 miles an hour, the speed of a jet aircraft. Japan's tsunami defences are among the best in the world, but the tsunami is immovable, unstoppable, overwhelming everything in its destructive progress. It reduces a house to matchwood in seconds. A car disappears into the deluge with its rear windscreen wiper still on. The quake struck at 2:46 local time in the middle of a normal working day. Imagine being in this office in Sendai when this happens. For a moment they freeze, immobilized by panic. Then a frantic scramble for shelter. And the quake goes on and on and on. For hundreds of miles around, office blocks, shopping centres and homes were shaken from their foundations up, spreading terror.
When it really started to get quite serious, the shaking, at that point I just thought, I could possibly die now. This is, I don't know if I can get down the stairs in time to reach the bottom floor. And then I also had my wife screaming down my ear because she was working in one of the buildings in Tokyo.
Japanese people are taught from an early age that earthquakes are part of life, and from an early age, the training kicks in at the vital moment. But more destructive still was the awesome power unleashed in the depths of the ocean, the tsunami. Each cubic metre of water weighs a ton. Its momentum sweeps away and smashes almost anything in its path. As it advances inland, it becomes a vast, silty churn. These are agricultural polytunnels being swallowed up. There are cars, shipping containers, parts of buildings in the swirl. No one knows how many homes have been damaged or destroyed, but it is certainly many thousands. Not everyone got away on time. The tremors from the biggest earthquake Japan has ever recorded were felt in the country's parliament in Tokyo. The Prime Minister spoke to the nation almost immediately.
It was a very strong earthquake, and in the Tohoku region, mainly and over a wide area, damage has been inflicted. I offer my deepest sympathy to the people who have suffered the disaster.
Damage to Japan's infrastructure gives yet more cause for concern. East of Tokyo, this oil refinery caught fire and blazed out of control, threatening to spread to residential suburbs nearby. Thousands of local people had to be moved out of their homes. And what has happened to the country's nuclear industry? 4 of Japan's 11 nuclear reactors were shut down automatically. The US Navy delivered coolants to one nuclear plant 150 miles north of Tokyo to prevent overheating. Tonight, the government warned that to reduce pressure in the plant, a small amount of radioactive vapor would have to be released, but insisted there was no risk to the public. Japan's transport infrastructure has in places been devastated, main roads ripped up, railway lines engulfed. At Sendai Airport, the tsunami crept up the runway to the very boarding gates of the terminal. Passengers took refuge on the roof. In Tokyo, people crowded into bus stations for buses that were going nowhere. The BBC's Tokyo correspondent Roland Burke witnessed the frustration of stranded passengers.
Just look at this, a huge line stretching down into the distance, people waiting to catch a bus. There are thousands of people, millions of people on the streets of Tokyo tonight. All trains have been suspended. The official advice, if you're safe, is to stay where you are. But after the shock of this afternoon's earthquake, many people just want to get home.
Dawn has already broken in Japan. Overnight there was another large quake in the north. The country awakes now to try to assess the immense damage that 2.5 minutes of geotectonic movement 80 miles out to sea can inflict. Alan Little, BBC News.
Well, as Alan said just there, it is now Saturday morning in Japan, and the extent of this damage is still coming to light. Just a few moments ago, I spoke to the BBC's Roland Burke in Tokyo for more on what the country's waking up to. Roland, it's now morning of the day after this massive earthquake, and I imagine it's only just now that the Japanese will be able to get some sense of how vast the devastation has been.
Yes, with the sun coming up, we began to see a more complete picture of what has happened along the Pacific coast to the north of Tokyo. We saw that paddy fields, what were paddy fields, what were villages in some places, are now seawater lagoons. The water came in and it hasn't gone out there. We're also getting a better idea of where the casualties are as well. Overnight we got little snippets of information. Nearly 300 bodies found in one area of one city. In another town, 300 houses destroyed. But now the local media is saying that one entire town in Iwate Prefecture that was home to 23,000 people has been largely destroyed. We're also hearing from the government that 1,200 houses at least have been completely destroyed. A university campus completely destroyed as well. A number of schools partially destroyed too. And remember, this tsunami and the earthquake hit in the middle of the afternoon. And we're hearing as well from Japan Railways that 4 of its trains have been missing since the disaster struck.
Roland, it's pretty clear that the death toll is going to climb an awful lot, and I imagine that the Japanese are thinking, is there anything that they could have done to see that this might be coming, to prepare themselves better?
I think the estimates at the moment for dead and missing are probably on the low side, and I'm sure as the rescuers get into different areas and people in planes are able to see in the light from the sky that is likely to rise. I think that it's a testament to Japanese engineering that this city, Tokyo, was hit very hard. It was the most violent quake that anyone I've spoken to can remember living through. The ground was really rolling like a ship in a storm at sea, and yet the buildings creaked, they cracked, they swayed a lot, but they didn't fall. And there isn't that much damage in Tokyo at all. But there isn't anything engineering can do about the weight of the tsunami, the great power of all that water coming in at hundreds of miles an hour. And that, I think, is what is going to have caused the most devastation and the most loss of life as well.
OK, Roland, it's going to be a very tough day for the Japanese ahead. Thanks very much, Roland Burke, joining us there from Tokyo. In response to this catastrophe, the world has stepped in with offers of help. Search and rescue teams from 45 countries are on standby. President Obama described the images coming out of Japan as heartbreaking and offered any assistance necessary. Our North America editor Mark Mardell has more now on this outpouring of international support.
Japan is one of the richest countries on Earth, but even so it will need help overcoming a disaster of this magnitude. With an airport underwater, cars and planes scattered like toys, they need heavy lifting equipment. President Obama has promised to help.
The images of destruction and flooding coming out of Japan are simply heartbreaking. On behalf of the American people, I conveyed our deepest condolences, especially the victims and their families, and I offered our Japanese friends whatever assistance is needed.
The President was woken at 4 in the morning to be told of the disaster. He seems more comfortable taking the lead on this than he has over Libya. A US aircraft carrier is based in Japan, along with 38,000 American troops. Now he's sent another aircraft carrier and 4 other ships, including the 7th Fleet's command vessel. The US military has had practice. There was a big mission after the earthquake in Haiti. Obama is determined the world should see the US use its immense power for more than just fighting wars. The UN can offer sympathy, but not battalions.
We will do anything and everything we can at this very difficult time. We will be watching closely as the aftershocks are felt across the Pacific and Southeast Asia throughout the day.
Under San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge, an unfamiliar surge of water. The west coast of America was braced for the worst as giant waves headed across the Pacific. People were told to get to high ground. So far, several ships and docks have been smashed. The first concerns are about Hawaii. 7-foot-high waves came ashore, but there seems to have been little damage.
The Japanese people are such close friends of ours, and I have such a close personal friendship and connection to the Japanese people, in part because I grew up in Hawaii, where I was very familiar with Japanese culture. That just makes our concerns that much more acute.
The president said this tragedy was a reminder that ultimately humanity is one and that Japan will come back stronger than ever with help from its friends. Mark Mardell, BBC News, Washington.
Phone lines went down almost immediately, but within minutes, incredible images and eyewitness accounts of the quake and the tsunami were flying around the world via internet and social networking sites. Millions of people are going online for the latest information, and our reporter Katie Connolly is here to walk us through the wealth of information that you can find on the BBC News website. So what are we putting up on the page? What more information are people being able to get there, Katie?
Well, Katie, we've really never seen images like this from a disaster before. I read on one blog people have called it the first viral disaster, people sending these images via email and Twitter and what have you around the web. And what we've really tried to do at BBC Online is put that all together in one place for people. The hub of our coverage is what we call the live page, which, as the name suggests, is updated live. We have reports coming in every couple of minutes, not only from our reporters on the ground and from the various authorities, but really from people who are watching our coverage and people who are there in Tokyo and other places around Japan telling us what's really going on. You know, we've had people tell us that they were standing in Tokyo watching the buildings sway and the ground ripple beneath them. We've had people communicating about the fear and the devastation in terms of people looking for their loved ones and wondering what's happening. It's a really sort of live feeling of what it's like over there.
It's amazing that you mentioned this thing of the first viral disaster, because as I was watching the pictures coming in out of Japan, this morning, I kept thinking, we have never seen this before. We've never seen such a large natural disaster almost in real time. And the quality of the pictures, those helicopter shots, all of the pictures that we saw are just extraordinary.
Yeah, it's really quite incredible, these walls of water. They're profoundly humbling images in my mind. And one of the things we have online, which I think is really interesting, is what we've done is taken some of those images and put them over a map of Japan, so you can actually see where in Japan these things are happening. So if you've seen that footage of the waves creeping up the airline tarmac, which is quite astonishing footage, you can see exactly where in Japan that airport is, how far away it is from Tokyo or from somewhere where you might have loved ones. So we're really trying to contextualize all this for our viewers in a way that wasn't possible before the web.
And clearly, the epicenter is in Japan. Japan has suffered overwhelming damage, but the reach of this quake is being felt right around the Pacific Rim.
That's right, and there's a lot of uncertainty, particularly here in the United States earlier this morning, about when the waves might hit the west coast and what that might mean for Hawaii and even as far as Alaska. And one of the things we tried to do online was illustrate that through maps, showing you exactly when the waves were going to hit at what point and when people might expect to be seeing some impact.
Okay, Katie Connolly there of our online team. Thanks so much, Katie. And of course, there is a huge amount of information there, pictures, video, and information that you can get on our website as well. Still ahead here on BBC World News America, the science behind Japan's deadly earthquake. What made the country so susceptible? The answer lies in one of nature's most dangerous rings. And this isn't the first time Japan has dealt with the aftermath of such a disaster. We look back at the country's history of deadly quakes.